Malcolm Gladwell was born the 3rd of September 1963 to Joyce and Graham Gladwell in Fareham, Hampshire, United Kingdom. He is now Christian, but he was raised in Mennonite tradition and was an only child growing up. Gladwell and his family moved to Elmira, Ontario, in Canada in 1969. Where his father became a mathematician at the University of Waterloo. As a child, Gladwell says that he was always fascinated of his father's love of mathematics. He explains that it always amazed him how someone so close to him was doing something that he had no understanding of. His mother, on the other hand, Joyce, was a psychotherapist who was from a small village in Jamaica. In high school, Gladwell attended Ontario High School, where he immersed himself in conservative politics. After college, he moved to America, where he eventually became a journalist for The New Yorker. Many of the ideas in his books were birthed from articles in The New Yorker. He then wrote his first book, The Tipping Point, which was a national success and led to various other books which were also widely accepted in the world of literature and huge successes. He still to this day works at The New Yorker and writes new books. As human beings, we often split ourselves into groups. People who like this music and people who don't. Or people who look at the world as an amazing place comparative to those who just look at it as a giant rock. You can classify humans in billions of different ways. And that's because, in some degree, we are all different. We have a different arrangement of planks, atoms, molecules, etc. And this is something we as humans hold very dear to our hearts. But on the other side of this big picture type of thinking, we all have similarities. Some we control, others we don't. For example, you may like the same music as someone, or go to the same school as someone you are friends with. But also, we know that we are all made up of atoms. We all have the same perception of time, and lastly, we're all human and we all make decisions. Throughout life as human beings, we all have to make decisions. It's unavoidable. Decisions are very difficult to think about, how they work, why we choose what we choose, and when in the process of making a decision, whether it be a 5-hour-long process or a 5-second process, do we actually choose the thing that we stick to? And finally, when is our decision correctly corresponding to our perception of knowledge the best? Or in other words, when in the process of deciding something, is our thinking the best? This type of thinking is what the incredible and best-selling book Blink by Malcolm Gladwell is all about. By the way, the answer to the question previously asked about when our decision-making is best in the decision process, it's actually our first impression that is usually the best, but I'm not spoiling the book because it's not about when the decision process you're thinking is best, but it's about why.
For years has sat down with top tennis players and, Andre Agassi, Pete Sampras, Chris Everett, Jimmy Connors, and had long conversations with them about their game. And he said to me, Malcolm, after doing this for 30 years, I can honestly say that there is nothing to be learned about tennis from talking to top tennis players about tennis. I said, what do you mean? That's crazy. He said, well, let me give you an example. If you talk to top tennis players, and I've asked them, for years I've asked these guys, how do you hit a topspin forehand? And they say, I go back to the ball, and at the moment of impact with the ball, I roll my wrist, right, to generate topspin on the ball. And he heard that from everybody. So he said, okay, let's test this out. So he took a big digital video camera, and he took it to top tournaments, and he just filmed people as they were hitting topspin forehands. And what he discovered was that not a single top tennis player ever rolls their wrist at the moment of impact with the ball. The wrist is absolutely fixed. they roll the wrist after the ball's gone. It's part of their follow-through. Here we have a group of people who know more about topspin forehands than anyone in the history of topspin forehands, and yet they are completely incapable of describing how they hit a topspin forehand. Right? Now that is not because tennis players are dumb. On the contrary, they're really, really smart about tennis, but their intelligence about tennis is on an unconscious level. They play tennis instinctively. They play tennis the way those Getty experts, art experts looked at the Getty's Kuros, right? They don't have access to why they're doing the things they're doing. They just do them. Right? They do them brilliantly and really well. But when it comes time to describing how they do it, all they can do is make up a story. And it seems like it makes sense that you ought to roll your wrist when you, at the moment of impact with the ball. But in fact, that's not the way things are. Things really work when you hit topspin forehands. Now that's a really, really important lesson because, we go around often, particularly in business cultures, operating on the assumption that if someone can make a decision, that means they also ought to be able to accurately describe how and why they made that decision.
Personally, Malcolm Gladwell, the author of the book Blink, is my favorite author because he has a way of thinking that's completely out of the box. I'm also a very creative person, and I like to have my mind just simply completely blown. The Gladwell Effect and its impossibility to understand is from a simple point of view: the effect that you get when reading one of his books. He has published 5 books so far, mostly addressing social cues by giving more of a spectral perspective, or in other words, acting as a third-party view of human social and cultural phenomena, and explaining in depth how the things we do every day, like making decisions or buying things, how they work. Gladwell goes into depth on why people do these things and how we do them, but the effect his works leave on you gives you an entire new perspective on daily life and what humanity really is. They allow you to see society with no bias and give new meanings to things you do every single day. And that's what I like to call the Gladwell Effect. Blink is just one of his books. If I were to recommend in any order from start to finish all of the books that he's wrote, I would have to say The Tipping Point first, then Blink, then Outliers, then David and Goliath, and finally What the Dog Saw.
There are many cases when we're making instinctive judgments when we have no access at all to our reasons why. And to believe naively in the explanations people give us for their behavior is to be misled, because if you roll your wrist at the moment of impact with the ball when you hit a topspin forehand, you'll sprain your wrist. Now this is a talk for another time, but I have very strong feelings about how this applies to something like market research. And I feel that companies around this country are profoundly misleading themselves when they have focus groups, and they naively take down as fact what consumers say when it comes time to explain their feelings about a new idea or a product or some other piece of advertising or whatever's being tested. So these kinds of decisions are mysterious, and we need to respect that if we are to harness fully the power of this kind of decision making.